Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Astro 101, Meet the Planets. This is your host, the Peace Dealer. And please make sure you know this video is a prerequisite for my entire Astro 101 to 105 series. 105, of course, will cover natal chart analysis. 104 applies the understanding of planetary aspects. 103 is going to go into astrological houses, and 102 introduces you to the zodiac. And when you actually interpret natal charts or want to understand astrology, we, in looking at a natal chart or a transit chart, see zodiac signs marked by houses, but what transits through those houses and signs? You guessed it, the planets. And as such, we are going to introduce this concept here right now first. And so make sure before you watch any other Astro 10 series, you start with this one. In the first part of the series, we're going to break down the significance of the planets that are a part of this solar system. We will introduce unconventional and innovative, let's say, applications and archetypes for each of these planets that you can apply for your astrological analysis. Astrology is not a belief like a religion or some philosophy. It is more akin to a language. And when you speak a language, you have proper terminology expressed through different functions. Namely, as you will see throughout this series, whereas zodiac signs can function as adverbs or adjectives, the planets will represent more of verbs, actions. While not limited to only being verbs, it's a great way to, in this introduction, look at these planets. We will also uncover how both luminaries and each of the planets can represent archetypes relative to actual people and roles that are played out in and out of society. I aim to give you a base understanding of these concepts so that you can take these base ideologies, have fun with it, and make up your own system that is at least aligned with the pattern of truth we will uncover. Given that this is not an astronomy course, we won't be going into details about how many light years each planet is from the sun. We're going to go hardcore into the astrological symbology, and mainly for the purpose of this course, how you can see each planet when analyzing them in transit charts and in the natal chart. So if you're ready, let's begin. First up, we have everyone's favorite luminary, the sun. As we know, all the planets that revolve around the sun make up the symphony of the representatives of our solar system. You could look at each planet as an organ of consciousness, which I will get into. And the reason why that is important is because the main luminary, that is the sun, represents conscious awareness. The sun will always travel 1 degree every day. And this is what creates the ecliptic path that it travels while it intersects the Earth's equator. But we'll talk about that in Astro 102 when we actually detail what the zodiac is. For now, we'll go into the significance of the sun in astrology. Like I just mentioned, the sun, of course, represents your conscious awareness, and it is activated through your intentions. The sun is what enables you to not only be aware of your surroundings and your inner world when you apply that light, but it goes a long way towards tracking the growth of one's persona and the expression of their ego. The sun is one of the 3 points in the Trinity that we will speak on regarding the sun, moon, and Mercury that represent who you are. And as such, just knowing someone's sun sign in relation to the rest of their planets will be enough to give you a good psychological makeup, even if you make that person's sun sign and position the first house. But let's not jump the gun once again. Houses is Astro 103. For now, all we want to make clear with is that when you're looking at the position, the sign, and the degree of anyone's particular sun sign, or in a transit chart where you are looking at where the sun is positioned on that day, what you are measuring is the quality and the nature of one's ability to not only be aware consciously, but to express their spirit. And as such, the position of one's sun sign reveals the nature of their life force and is the spirit that animates their body and gives them life. Of course, if we just had our spirits, we would be like babies who don't have the ability to process what we're aware of and then reflect the understanding of how we feel about it. Which brings us to our next and maybe most important luminary other than the sun. Next up, we have the moon. Given that the moon revolves around the earth, it is much quicker in movement than Mercury, the fastest planet in the solar system. That being said, this allows for, unlike the sun that transits through a zodiac sign every 30 days, the moon will take at least 2.5 days to make it through one zodiac sign. It's very important to look into one's moon sign because once again, it only takes less than 3 days for it to go through a sign, which gives a bit more exclusivity down to the degree when analyzing what we call the soul, the subconscious mind, who you are at your core. To be completely honest, not joking here, gaining someone's time of birth and really understanding their moon sign is like getting their nudes. And in being able to analyze the moon position, this will not only reveal how one was nurtured by their nurturing figure, whether a mother or dad or both, but it is the best way to break down and interpret who someone is at their core. Once you take the mask off, once no one is around, when they are just by themselves, it is the moon sign that expresses itself. Whereas the sun is the conscious expression of your spirit, taking what constitutes you and shares it, the moon is the receptive quality that is your soul, highlighting your emotional response to everything that you experience. This is not only a very mysterious point, as scientists struggle to tell you how the moon even came to be, but like I just mentioned, is a deep point of revelation relative to who someone really is at the core of their being. In monitoring and analyzing the subconscious nature of anyone or anything through the moon sign position, this gives you considerable insight into the inner workings and inner nature of who it is you're analyzing. You quite literally can predict how these people will feel, how you feel, how you will feel, how you have felt. And as such is a point that should, true to its namesake, should be treated with care. Whereas the sun rules Leo, the moon rules Cancer. But like I mentioned before, we will save rulership for when we talk about the zodiac in Astro 102. What we also want to bring into account is, whereas the sun sign is the spirit and conduit, the moon is a vessel. It is your vessel. The spirit, which is connected to the mind, and the soul, which is connected to your body. And so you can look into the moon sign and gain insight into one's relationship with their physical body, as well as any planets or points that transit through the moon, or any natally in one's chart, which will represent them being a vessel to whatever planet or point exists next to it or directly conjunct and on it. But Astro 104 will go over planetary aspects like conjunctions, trines, and squares. So we've just discussed how the sun is your spirit and the moon represents your soul, what is within you. There is now one planet that completes this trinity, which enables us to link our inner world with how we express it, how we feel with the moon versus how we express those feelings through our spirit. That planet, of course, is Mercury, the representative of your brain and your brain processing unit. This introduces us to the personal planets, represented by Mars, Venus, and Mercury. The personal planets are, just like they sound, personal. And as we will highlight, exists before Jupiter and Saturn, representing themes that are not as personal. Whereas given especially how quickly Venus, Mercury, and Mars revolve around the sun relative to the other planets, we will explore how these planets are tangible and can be seen directly in our personal life. As such, like I mentioned before, Mercury is this link of the Trinity that takes your inner world through the moon and connects it with your brain processing function so that you can process and think and know what you express with your spirit. Albeit, just like your body, it is all interconnected, but each system of your body carries out several functions and roles. And that's where Mercury, the quickest planet in the solar system, that does have to retrograde every few moments so that we do not process information ahead of what we're conscious of, picks up, analyzes, and processes information so that we are not just aware of things. And with Mercury, I know that what I'm looking at is a camera. This is actually a sofa pillow, and this is a sofa or a couch. Obviously, the codex of Mercury ruling Gemini and Virgo of course, words and numbers, which I will go more into Astro 102, accounts for our physical processing of reality. And as such, Mercury will also represent the way one communicates relative to the sign it is in, the house, the aspects it's making. It could show you the difference between a mastermind relative to degree number or one who is learning lessons in growing and mastering their intellect and the way they think. This also is correlated to the magician in the tarot. Unlike the high priestess of the moon, which will allow you to be intuitive and gain receptive insights, Mercury represents our skill set and everything that we can achieve through the power of thinking. Of course, it is now the sun sign of the spirit that will express this in a performative fashion and put that light on it, but it shouldn't be understated the significance of Mercury when not only it will help alleviate communication issues when understanding how to bring out the power of your personal Mercury placement, but also accounting for retrograde periods that has to reevaluate the information that, of course, has been consciously aware of and processed all through your mind. In being able to account for the pattern that Mercury travels through its transits, this can not only help you become a more effective communicator, but as we will go into future series, knowing what sign and house it is will allow you to understand how it expresses itself and where. But of course, for now, understand that relative to this personal planet, Mercury is the first, the quickest, and it is the reason why you are able to process what and how is happening as it is happening. The next personal planet is the personal planet that we all love dearly. And yes, I'm talking about Venus, the goddess Aphrodite. Whereas Mercury will represent your brain, Venus will represent the quality of one's heart. And what we see with Venus is that she rules value. What we value symbolically, metaphorically, and what we value monetarily as well. This opens up the system of barter and trade, of course, because we only trade that which is valuable to us so that we can gain value. As such, Venus is very much so a taste maker. Mercury will go into more what one likes to think about and how they communicate. Venus is strictly how you give and receive pleasure. The nature of a Venusian native's taste is heavily dependent on the sign and house. But regardless of whatever zodiac sign she is in, Venus will always polish and beautify whatever it is in, whatever it is doing, whatever it is a part of. This is exceptionally key and relevant when it comes to analyzing interpersonal relationships with other people. It's not uncommon to see people who share Venus placements with others like or in a similar way be into the same things. Just having Venus on someone else's moon or sun is enough to create a heartfelt link. Of course, whether this is romantic or platonic will depend more on the individual than planet placements, but thankfully the placements of these planets provide so much more detail. For the sake of this Astro 101 course, just like we said, the sun is your spirit, the moon is your soul, Mercury is your brain, and Venus is your heart. In other words, what do you love? And this will be not only perfectly revealed through the Venus placement, Venus will also speak of the value you build in yourself so that you can gain value. It's quite interesting how we look a lot to Venus as a representative of love, when I would say it is more so a representative of value and money. But realistically, this is the ruler of feminine sexuality. As we will talk about for the next planet, both that planet and Venus rule more sex, but both men and women have feminine and masculine sides to them. The receptive quality of how we sexually express what brings pleasure to us is 100% ruled by Venus. You unlock Venus in your chart, you not understand what is at the core of your heart, but in understanding someone else, you can quite literally break down the core of what they love, why they love it, and it's the best way to know how to get to someone's heart if you at least know what you're doing. And of course, just like the moon, handle with care and respect. For our last personal planet, we do have Mars, the god of war. Mars is actually going to represent your sexual private parts and is a key indicator about what one desires. You have pleasure with Venus. That's how you like it. Well, how do you like to give it? How do you like to do it? Quite literally, how do you like to do it? Mars is actually the number one indicator that will enable one to know how they have sex, but also how they take action. Whereas Venus is very much so influenced and influences pleasure, Mars is strictly based on desire. What is it you desire to do? How do you desire to do it? And how effectively can you get it done is all ruled by Mars. And as we will go into delineating the different zodiac signs, this is also a really great indicator to mark athleticism. Whereas Mercury will more so indicate intellect and Venus artistic ability, it's not uncommon to see some of the best athletes with prominent Mars positions. This is actually the topic of a study called the Mars effect or the Mars experiment. Case in point, not referencing this experiment, but it is notable that the strongest or most powerful punch in the UFC is held by someone who has their Mars in Capricorn, the sign of its exaltation. Floyd Mayweather is another great example. His Mars is in Aquarius on Jupiter. Just to show you how Mars does translate in elite athleticism for elite athletes, all with which can be understood just by knowing its sign, position, degree, and house. Mars, of course, will also illustrate one's tendency to anger and also how aggravated or how easily aggravated one can be. This has the potential to be a very volatile planet relative to one's chart. But basically, what we want to monitor is one's ability to take action. And what you'll find between those who are very inhibited and unsure of the actions they take versus those who are maybe too sure of themselves and take super reckless actions can all be determined by one's Mars position. And of course, the aspects it makes to other planets. Next, we'll be looking into the impersonal planets. The impersonal planets represent Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and of course, Pluto. Yeah, they say it's not a planet, but for the purpose of this Astro 101, we will pretend it still is. The impersonal planets revolve at a much slower pace than the personal planets. So unlike Mars, that takes at least 2 years to revolve with the retrograde, Jupiter is going to take at least 1 year just to go through one sign. It revolves around the zodiac every 12 years. Saturn every 28. And of course, we move on to Pluto, which is like 248 years. That being said, unlike the personal planets like Mercury, which literally apply to your own brain, and Venus, your own heart, Jupiter and Saturn help us time the nature of these personal planets relative to what happens in our culture and society. And by the time we get to the outer planets, which are trans-Saturnian, representing that which is outside of our material reality, this now borders us along the transpersonal. And it's where we start getting hippy dippy, weird, crazy, but really divine and genius. That being said, Jupiter represents our marker of evolution. Depending on one's Jupiter position in their chart, this will not only let you know what they are gifted at being, doing, and expanding, but it also goes into their ability to interpret the meaning of experiences. Jupiter is, as we will mention in the 102 course with its rulership to Sagittarius, associated with teaching, but also being able to show one the bigger picture. And so whether one is very, very inclined to explore their environment and travel, or keeps that inhibited, is, as you guessed, very much so determined by their Jupiter position, or at the very least, we can say influenced. However, we do want to appreciate, as an impersonal planet, how one's Jupiter position will also influence a lot of what in their external environment they are not only influenced by, but heavily inspired by. There is much we can say about the biggest planet in the solar system, but what I want to really help wrap your mind around is to see this as a point of evolution. This is especially seen through its transits through anyone's houses and signs. Wherever it is, they're getting ready to evolve. They're getting ready to expand. And you can tell a whole lot about how philosophical one is or not based on the Jupiter position and why and how they express this as well. The next impersonal planet, and in my opinion, one of the most important, is Saturn, aka Kronos. This, in many ways, is a great timer for events, and relative to the personal planets before it, a great planet to base cycles around. Saturn is very, very key, especially because in representation, it does symbolically represent the material reality. In fact, the totality of the material universe. This will be evidenced as we will talk about the planets after and how they represent that which is outside or beyond the physical. Saturn has so much symbology like the rest of the planets, but we see that even though this is a planet of liberation, it represents limitations, karma, time and timing, and it's the best indicator of one's work ethic. Given that everyone at age 28 to 29 receives a Saturn return, it's a great progression to see the nature of how one will eventually return their power, and relative to the karmic element or responsibility, or of course their relationship with responsibility and authority that they express through these 28-year cycles, could reveal a whole lot of how successful or unsuccessful they will be. Saturn is a planet that gets a horrible rap because it is the tester, and it will make sure that you, of course, are maintaining integrity. If you think about the creation of a car, there are always standardized testings that are necessary. If your car, or if this technological device didn't get tested, you would get sold a defected car. You would get sold a car that was not tested to see if it could run properly. And so at every stage of development, there needs to be tests. This is no different than your life as well. You will always come through a series of integrity checks and tests. Of course, when Saturn is not honored, this integrity becomes corrupt and one becomes super controlling and manipulative. But relative to the power and integrity that Saturn represents, this not only helps you carve out what your limits are, but through the liberation of passing these tests is necessary to reach beyond those limits. Once again, however, it's important to understand Saturn as a point of material reality. If you think about the system and structure of how our economy works, of how society works, there are rules. Saturn in astrology represents authority, and as such, authority figures. Any decision made and the capability to make decisions is also influenced by one's Saturn position. So if you think about the rules of any given system or any given society or any place and the authority that enforces those rules, they of course create a bit of a bounds to where anything outside of those rules is out of bounds and you are issued a penalty. These are all Saturnian concepts if you think about the way this matrix is even created. This is necessary so that our souls and spirits could, of course, be housed in this temple that is a body. Of course, whether this temple is a temple or a cage and prison actually depends a lot more on your relationship with Kronos than you may be aware. Our next impersonal planet, an outer planet, is Uranus. And Uranus is very, very, very tricky in understanding because every planet after Saturn represents not only that which is not visible without the use of technology, but also simultaneously that which is outside of our physical material reality. As such, we like to correlate Uranus to one's innovative quality and inner genius. This planet is also correlated with sudden awakenings and, of course, revolutions. If you think about the notion of the system, if a system were to stay the same way, it would get repetitive and monotonous. And if you think of every piece of technology that we've had, it has been upgraded and innovated. Uranus provides revolutionary insight so that we can take pre-existing systems and innovate them for more efficiency, for more liberation, to free people from the constraints of a system that does not work as well as we once may thought it has. Uranus also represents the causal mind. So if Saturn is going to be the realm of physical material reality in the totality of it, you have the causal realm of the mind, which exists outside the physical. It's not necessarily tangible, just like a frequency isn't necessarily tangible, but it still exists. And once again, even though Uranus is a much slower moving planet, and like the rest we'll mention, represents more of the qualities of a generation, it is still a supernatural aspect that you can tap into at any time, representing the innovative quality of your own consciousness to march the beat of your own drum and to step into the uniqueness that is you. The whole notion and quality of channeling can also be discerned by one's Uranus position, as this will not only help one channel higher frequency beings, but tune one's frequency into that which may vibrate quicker than this 3D dimensional reality. As will be the case with trans-Saturnian planets, however, the less grounded these energies are, the more cuckoo you will come across relative to the constraints and dictates of what's acceptable and what the rules are with the system of Saturn. Uranus is now the genius that most people will not see, but still exists, and lends towards the innovation and revolution of everything that exists. For our next impersonal and outer planet, we have Neptune. Poseidon surprisingly can allude to one's potential for alcoholism, delusions, drug abuse, but in its pure essence represents dreams. Saturn for the physical, Uranus for the causal realm of the mind, and Neptune representing the astral realm of imagination. So to imagine is the function of Neptune, the quality of one's imagination, the ability for one to imagine, the nature of one's fantasies, one's susceptibility to frauds, con artists, and deceptions, all ruled and influenced by Neptune. Just like Uranus, because this is after Saturn, trans-Saturnian, it does not fare well for material reductionism, as there's little to nothing material about your imagination. Neptune represents everything that is beyond your physical senses. Mercury is going to be the brain processing, utilizing your 5 physical senses personally. Neptune is everything beyond that 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum that exists, but must be sensed and believed through imagination. This is where things get murky, because according to science nowadays, Uranus is more of science fiction, and the symbolic nature of Neptune is more of a fantasy. When in reality, your capacity to see through this veil and reality, which is a dream, is fully influenced by Neptune. And the capacity for you to utilize your imagination or experience your imagination to channel insight, to gain greater belief through moments of stress or inspiration, or provide inspiration, is also going to be seen by Neptune. Neptune enables us to exist outside of the boundaries. It's quite literally coloring outside the lines, but it's a lot of the creativity that influences through the bounds of our imagination what we can believe is possible, because the only thing greater than knowledge is imagination. Your relationship with sleep, your relationship with fairies, I promise you, otherworldly beings, beings that we consider fantasy, anything that exists, especially in your imagination, can be ruled or governed by Neptune. And what's very, very key here is the subconscious link that it will have to your subconscious mind, which can also represent a higher octave of not only your heart and Venus, but of your subconscious mind. And the less integrated this is, the more you may be susceptible to addictions and deceptions. But the more integrated it is, the more you can enable through Neptune to help you see, sense, and believe beyond the physical. And last but not least, we have our final impersonal planet, one that is no longer considered a planet, Pluto. Pluto represents our unconscious. Pluto represents everything beneath the surface that we don't see. It represents unconscious fears, and can range from exposing rape to the purity of psychological healing. When we deal with Pluto, we deal with extremes. Mercury is closest to the sun, and like Venus is very hot. Pluto is the farthest from the sun, and it is very, very cold. With its irregular orbit, like Uranus, we see that it takes a while for it to just move through just one zodiac sign. And yet, no matter where it touches, it brings awakening and it wreaks havoc on anywhere that has not been awakened, integrated, and understood. Pluto is a very amazing way for us to look at our fears and claim and conquer them. Another amazing way to see Pluto is as a transformer. Through transits, we will see it expose what it's through, but it's great to see in one's natal chart to determine what they're here to awaken and transform in others. Pluto brings with it, in its extremity, a powerful and strong obsessive quality. And just like the moon and Venus needs to be handled with care, as it could represent loads of unconscious, unresolved trauma that needs to be brought light to, or at least properly integrated. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We have introduced you to the planets. This, out of all the 5 courses, is easily the shortest. And as you will see, from 102 to 105, things get very intensive as we have a lot of information to cover. But I wanted to make this one short, easy, and to the point, just to give you keywords and archetypes and just ways to see these planets, as well as the 2 luminaries. In 102, we are going to look into the zodiac and explain the nature of the zodiac signs and how to interpret them. In Astro 103, we're going to go over the astrological houses and what happens when planets travel through them. 104 enables us to look at the aspect angles between planets, which will enable us to see the language between transits. And Astro 105 will take all the first 4 and synthesize all these concepts so you can get to reading people's natal charts like a pro. It's very important to see how each step into each other, and that's why I wanted to start off with the planets. What does this planet mean in this sign? What does this planet mean in this house? That will be the subject for later study, possibly in Astro 2.0 series, but I want to get all the basics out of the way. Once again, the purpose for the short length of this course was just to give you a quick keyword understanding of what you can bring with you into the 102, 103, 104, and 105 courses. There will be a deeper, more in-depth look at each of the planets and more unique ways to understand them. But I wanted to at least introduce through this a fun and easy way to see them all as organs of consciousness. I hope you enjoyed Astro 101, and I know you will enjoy Astro 102. We go way more in depth with actual science to help you understand the zodiac signs, the nature of each sign, and it's very important that you take what you learned about the planets and prepare to apply it for the future installments. As always, you guys stay blessed. Peace.